This is Chewing the Gristle with my co host, poet Tim Conroy. Welcome, Tim.
Hey, Al.
We want to welcome our guest poet today, the poet Dan Fecht.
Nice to be here.
Is the editor of Culture and DC Life magazine in Washington, D.C. His debut collection of poems, Assisted Suicide Talk Show, was released in December 2019 by Finishing Line Press. His book was met with a glowing endorsement from actress Merle Hemingway, Ernest Hemingway's granddaughter. With DC Magazine, Dan also instituted the literary column Poet's Viewpoint, to help poets at all stages of their careers and influence readers and intellectuals in the nation's capital to appreciate poetry. He is co-founder of an English as a second language school in Florida, along with his wife, and is likewise passionate about teaching conversational English to immigrants seeking a new life in America. His work has appeared with Everglades National Park, LA Life magazine, and others. We welcome the poet Dan Fecht. With that, Dan, can you explain to us your poetry journey, your early influences, and how you came to be a poet?
Sure thing, Al. Well, thanks a lot, guys, again for having me. My journey is a funky one. I'm a military brat. And if you don't know what a military brat is, that is a kid whose father was in the military. And because of their father's choice to join the service, so did you. So you're running around the world every year and a half, 2 years, and you don't have a consistent set of friends ever. And just when you have friends, you think you have friends, the umbilical cord is ripped away within a year or two. So that really did something to me in my life. It helped me be able to build connections with people quickly and understand different cultures, because I lived in Europe, I lived in Asia, many different states. Anyhow, how it affected me, I would say it goes all the way back to second grade. I think about, there was a time our teacher had us write a book in class. And after we wrote the book, we could walk it down the hall to the publishing center. And I wrote the book, walked it down the hall, and the librarian was in the publishing center. And what she did was laminate the front cover and put a spiral on the, 15 pages. And I felt like a king. I was like, wow, okay, I have a book. Something in me thought I was already published. I had a book that I could just put on the shelf at home alongside all the books my mom and dad were buying. But anyway, it did something to me, because around that age frame, I was reading Shel Silverstein and his poems, and that had an impact early on me. So anyhow, it goes that far back. And then I was always creating things. I was always, my head, it's a constant motor. There's always ideas in there. Fast forward a little bit to about let's go late teenage years. And I really wanted to be a musician. And so I tried to put together a band with guys, and we did pretty good, but there was no consistency there. My favorite part of it was writing lyrics. I love to write lyrics for songs. And but as you may know, if you've ever been involved in the music field, it is very hard to keep 3, 4, or 5 guys on the same page long term. And so while I started seeing that happening, we'd be playing our songs, creating songs, playing cover songs. I started seeing some people weren't as dedicated. And I said, you know what? I like to write lyrics. I think I should be investing in writing too while I'm doing this, in case this doesn't work out. And so when I'm not jamming with the guys or trying to score a record deal, I was writing at home, and this is as early as 17. So there was a big stretch between elementary school, and about age 17 when I realized, hey, I like to write. I think I'm pretty good. But anyhow, so let's say I'm about 19, 18, playing with my buddies, and I realized around, let's say, somewhere I had been writing, but somewhere around 21 or 22 or 23, that I wasn't going to be a rock star. It just wasn't going to happen. But because it's just too much work to keep everybody on the same page. But the one thing I love about writing, the one thing I love about poetry is it's a very solitude thing. And I can do it myself, and I can make it work. And I believe in what I can do. So I really just started slaving away myself. I flipped the tables, and I didn't really do so much more with music. Music is a love of mine, but I just said, you know what? I don't think I should put my focus there around my early 20s. And I just went forward with writing poetry. And because my lyrics, I was writing lyrics for songs almost every day. And then I started composing a book early on, which that was like a practice book that was never published. Of course, you need those. And man, I don't know, thousands of poems or song lyrics. And, I would play surgery on them, tear them apart, put them in other places. And as the years evolve, so does your life. Things happen. You, especially as a military brat, I'm sure Tim can relate to that. And you just, what you thought you had is gone so quickly. And these are during your years of formation. And that affects you for life. The friends you think are for your life are not. So I never had that grounding with people from a young age. Like a lot of people can grow up with the same folks from their town in first grade all the way through college. And it's just, if you ask me, where are you from? I'm one of those weirdos that's going to look you dead in the eyes and be like, I don't know. And then I'll just say, well, kind of everywhere. Ha ha ha. And then I have to go into the story. But yeah, I think that mostly affected me as a writer. And there's just so much to draw on from that. Military brat, wanting to be a musician and switching over from musician or quote musician to writer. And, 1 out of 2 isn't bad.
Great. Tim.
Hey, Dan, just so I can mark this time of political chaos and the pandemic and the isolation we've felt, how has that impacted your writing in the past year and now?
Well, obviously we can't do as much. And with the magazine that I write for, I'm also a travel writer. So this was a big thing. I would go all around the country. They'd send me to hotels and places, and I'd write about my experiences. And I'd also create a lot of poems on the road too. And now I don't have the same ability to do that. There's just been nothing in that realm for about a year now. Yeah, for about a year. I've had to, when I had that sort of inspiration, it was amazing to be in a different city and looking out at, the skyline of Vegas, or, maybe on the coast somewhere. But now I'm back to my desk, and I think for me, I've been able to handle it pretty well. Some of my friends and family, not as much, but it does a toll on your mental health. I think you start to think too much. But I've tried to reconstitute thinking too much into my poetry, and I've been really pleased with things that have been coming about writing wise, despite all the chaos and how horrible the situation is.
How about describe to the listeners your poetry style?
I would say my poetry style is it's narrative. It's somewhat narrative. Of course, I love to roll with free verse and just rolling off the tongue, I guess you could say. It just keeps going and it keeps going because my mind is a constant machine. So when I write my poems, I draw some from my experiences, but a lot of it is just fictionalized. I take an idea and I it's like I stretch the skin 10 times as far. And then I come up with something, much like in my book, Assisted Suicide Talk Show. I know I've dealt with depression in my life. I haven't dealt with suicidal thoughts, but I know many people who have. And since I know depression, I've seen people talk about this and that about suicide, I was able to create poems that I believe can help people understand the struggles that people go through that feel this way. And it really, these poems just came out of me.
Well, let's describe your formal writing practice. So, you know, a lot of people write in the morning or write at night. Some people write with a pen and a journal. Some people just keyboard. Talk about the rituals around your writing practice.
Yeah, so I'm a Microsoft Word guy, first of all. I type and type and type. It just seems to come out of my fingers. When I sit down at the desk, something happens. But to back up a little bit from there, I usually start with an idea. Actually, I start with a title. I could be out anywhere. I could be shopping. I could be driving. If a title pops in my head that I'm thinking about, I will open my notes on my phone and write this name or expression down, or on especially a sticky note. My wife used to get on me so much because I would I would have sticky notes. I would write title names or expressions I heard and thought were neat, and I would stick it in my pocket for later. And then, you know, she's washing my clothes and she's like, yeah, this is a writer. She'd pull the pockets out and there's 7 sticky notes that fall to the floor, and she opens them and she'll post on Instagram, this is my husband's the trash in his pocket. And I'm like, well, thanks a lot. Yeah, great. But I start usually with a title, which is a little atypical, I think, for a lot of poets. And once the title's there, it just creates itself. It's almost like I don't know. It takes a new form. It comes out of my fingers. And of course, I'll have moments where I pause. I'll get a line. I'll get a verse. I'll get a stanza. And then I'll pause and I'll be like, okay, all right, I'm on track here. And then I'll just kind of close my eyes and think, and it'll keep coming. And then maybe delete a few times. Then I have the second stanza. And I'm like, all right, I'm rolling. Let's keep going. And then I've had poems written as fast as 10 minutes and as slow as, you know, a few days.
Well, let's hear a couple of these poems. It'd
Sure.
be perfect time to hear them.
Sure. Okay. First poem I'll read is called Snap Out of It. And this is one of the first poems in my book about, you know, people that don't quite understand depression. Say it louder for the people in the back. I solemnly swear that my interest in existence has faltered like Icarus plummeting into the Aegean. Nosedive, eye-plane. Just break free, they said. A mental barrier muting the trigger impulses and the firing of dopamine through my brain. Confiscate my future. Snap out of it, they said. If my mind will change, then Lord, speak in my sleep by way of paralysis in light of an archangel. Or then I become a fish in the Mariana Trench. Dark, but I am swimming. Predators not seen. I pray to not be prey. Sometimes.
That's great, man. How about another one?
Sure. This poem is called Bow Your Head and Close Your Eyes. And this poem is related to, you know, growing up I grew up in a Christian home, and it does influence a lot of my writing, but it's also questioning the practice, the holes in the practice, but understanding the root of it, and in a positive way. And this goes to kind of my childhood, but I stretched it again because that's what I do. Bow your head and close your eyes. Sitting in the pews for pastors preaching about how us people are like microwaves with a quick minute option. One button press, Done. We want everything faster than fast. Mother's in tune, and father is nodding off, mother poking him. Shepherd speaks. The sheep listen. Am I the only one with restless leg syndrome? Commandments to be followed. Seems a crushing task for teenager. But I want this wholeheartedly. I wear a watch. It's 8:15. I set the alarm and let it go off as a reminder to wrap it up. Elderly woman in Sunday hat turns around and scolds me. Your timing is not God's timing. I didn't understand. I just wanted lunch. Oh, double meaning.
Yeah, that's terrific stuff. Brother Al.
So you talked about how you come to the poem. Talk to us about revision. What is your process? How much revision do you do? And is a poem ever finished?
Sure. When I write a poem, typically it's when I'm deciding to put together a collection. And I write solo poems, but I've already thought of the theme for where the book needs to go. And what I'll generally do is I'll write all the poems in the book. And that will take time. That will definitely take time. There are some days where I write a poem and I'll look at it the next day and I'll be like, oh, this is trash. And I'll delete the whole thing. But maybe I like the title and then I'll start over with a blank page minus the boldface title of the poem. Anyway, how I revise is I don't spend too much time on the poem. If I feel pretty good about it, I keep going to the next poem, the next poem. Next thing you know, the book will have, maybe we'll have about 70 poems and I got to cut from there. So I would probably cut about 20 to 30, and that's time consuming because I think that's the hardest part for me because, you know, each poem is kind of like your baby, especially if you believed in it to a point to keep it in the file without deleting it the first time. So that's where we're going through and we're just making the necessary cuts, taking parts out. Again, then I'll sit on it. If after I have one read through, I will sit on it for a few months. I won't even look at it because I believe if I continue to read, I take time away from my work that's completed, or at least first round, second round completed. I come back to it and I see it with new eyes. And that's really important for any writer or poet. You need to step away from your work. You've got to step away and let it sit. You got to let it simmer. I think of it like a stew or a chili. You know, it's got to simmer and it tastes better the next day in the fridge, you know, after you pull it from the fridge and warm it up. So do your poems. They usually taste, well, if you're a bad cook, it tastes worse the next day. And in this case, if you have a bad poem, you're a bad cook and you need to scratch that one and start over. So, yeah, I think the important thing for a writer is to know that you got to feel somewhat confident. I think perfectionism is the enemy. I used to deal with that a lot more, where I thought everything had to be absolutely perfect. And I also thought the word perfectionism was a good thing. And it's really not that great, because if you're not just done, you're never done. And I would say I would get it about where I feel about 80% good about the poem. And then I let it sit for a while, like I was mentioning earlier. And now we revisit, and it could be totally different. Maybe I don't like it anymore. So I can't stress that enough. Let it stew. Let the poems and the writing stew. Step away. Don't think. Too many people or too many beginner poets think, hey, it's done when it's done, as soon as I finish it, as soon as I write all the poems. You got to go through, take out some words, change some words. There's better usage of certain words here and there. It's truly a process, and you just have to marry the process. You really do. You have to be committed, and you have to be mostly the perfectionist at the end. When the book is done, this is how I see it. When the book is done, you have your collection together. You have 70 poems, 50 poems, 40 poems. This is when it's okay to be the perfectionist. I think this is when It's okay to do the surgery, to go in there and change things. At least that's how I deal with it, because I like to have a completed product to work with instead of taking the baby steps with one poem at a time. And it's just how I see it.
Who is feeding your interest now? Who are you reading as poets? What is fueling your creativity?
Well, some poets I have really been enjoying in the recent times, and I would say, if you're familiar with Ocean Vuong, he came out with a book a few years ago called Night Sky with Exit Wounds. And that book, the way he uses his imagery and metaphors, it's like a circus of the wind. It's amazing. He just cuts through the pages with this is like that. Oh, this is it's just so it's truly, when you say poetry is poetry, that's what it's like when I read it. And there's no wonder why he's really risen up in recent years. So I would recommend anyone to check out Ocean Vuong's Night Sky with Exit Wounds book. It's a slim volume that'll really, really help your writing as well. And if you are a beginning poet, wow, what a guy to learn from. I always enjoyed W.S. Merwin as well. I love the way he speaks about nature. Oh man, so colorful. It puts you right there. And so he's just one for the ages. Natalie Diaz had a book that was great called When My Brother Was an Aztec. And it's about her brother as he was dealing with a serious drug addiction and how her and her family dealt with that. And this is a neat read. Great newer poet to come across. I really enjoyed Tim Conroy's book, Theologies of Terrain. That was an excellent one. That was cool. And I look forward to more things from Tim. The way he covers family life and with the flair of the Low Country. Yeah, that's something else. And another one I would like to mention is William Brewer. He covered the opioid epidemic in West Virginia in his book, it's I Know Your Kind. And we don't talk enough about the stigma of the opioid epidemic, much like suicide. And talking about that, we've done pretty good in recent years. We have reached a point where people are talking about depression, but we're not far enough. When people go a little further than that, people are like, whoa, hold on, buddy. Let's not go there. So the whole reason I really wrote the book was to break the next round of stigma.
Share with us a couple more of your poems, please.
Sure. This one is a short poem. Again, to give a little backstory, the way my book of poetry works is it tells the story of a character named Cade, and he's in his 40s, miserable, totally miserable, and he's decided he wants to take his own life. And he goes on a talk show to talk about it. And he just gets drilled about it. Why are you going to do that? Why this? Tell us more. And it stems back to his childhood all the way to adulthood. So it's like a consecutive order of the book really is in order from childhood to adulthood and why he wants to do this. So there's moments that are totally unapologetic in the book, but I want people to see this is actually what people think that deal with this. So this poem is called Magic Act. And that gun that hangs on the wall, maybe you learn to like it. And every day you gazed at that gun in case you chose to do it. Just like a bad magician, make yourself disappear. But then you can't bring yourself back.
Wow. That very concise, very to the point.
Hey, Dan, let's dig into your craft just a little bit.
Sure.
And talk about the poetic elements you tend to rely on to create your poetry, and the poetic elements you tend to stay away from.
Yeah, sure. For me, I tend to gear towards a lot of metaphor and simile and imagery. I really like to draw a picture for people. It's just freely. It just rolls freely. That's my goal. My whole goal with it is when I sit down with a poem, I want the words to take you on a journey. That's the goal. If I don't feel like I'm taking you on a journey, then it's not a poem from me. It has to have a place it's going. It has to have a little theme in itself, something you can relate to. There has to be irony. I love to use irony. Oh, wow. Okay. That's funny. That's relatable. I go for that. I couldn't do it any other way. And bottom line is I make a conscious effort to try and make that journey stick with you. I like to give life and light to people through concepts of darkness and death. So I don't like the doom and gloom, despite how the book might come across. I like the light, but I'm trying to show people the light through darkness because darkness is so relatable sometimes. And I want to take you to that place on the other side. Once we understand this, once we know there is a future, if we let there be a future, if we make that a future instead of an ending. And, I just encourage people to give it one last shot in life if they can. And I try to bring that light to you.
Dan, how do you approach line breaks, openings and endings of poems? Do you have a certain approach, or is that more gut instinct each time?
Mm-hmm. Well, I love line breaks, and I do sometimes in my poems. I do some funky things with spacing and symbols, even sometimes, because there's the breathing. It's the breathing. I love the breathing of a long space. When I have a long space or a line break, I want you to read it as silence. And I want you to pick up on my next words 5 seconds later, because that's going to mean so much more. Instead of just reading it all, if it's written all together, it's meant to be read all together and like rather fast. But separated, I want those breaths from you because it digs into your skull, it digs into your soul. You think about what you just read for 5 seconds before you pick up the next words. And I think that has a major impact on poetry that people underestimate. And I think for new writers, take advantage of the spacing and even symbols that can draw out things you'd be surprised. But don't overdo it either. Once you overdo it, then people are just going to close your book. But anyway, of dire importance to me. And Tim, you mentioned, does it just happen? Yeah, it just happens sometimes. Sometimes I just feel the need to let the reader breathe, or to do something different with the stanza structure. And then I love the ending design also. I love the way a poem decorates the page. Sometimes it's over here, it's over here, it's over here, it's over here. And it has your eyes moving. Also, that's another thing, breathing and eye movement. I think eye movement from far left of the page to the far right of the page gives you the same time to analyze what you just read as waiting with breaths. And it digs deeper into you than if you read it all together. If you read it all together, it can dig in, but you'll probably have to read it again. So it's just a different impact you want to have. I'm not talking bad about either process. I'm just saying poetry is so full of art. When you really get even more creative about your, like you said, spacing and line breaks and whatnot, it just has to be explored even more. And I think a lot of modern day poets are doing a really good job of that too.
Brother Al.
Poets have resources that they refer to either for the writing process or as models in which to refer to when they're writing. Do you have resources that you use, and who are they, or what are they?
You know, I do read a lot of poems and poetry, and sometimes that gets me kick-started for my writing. I'm also, since I also write literature, I come from that realm. So I think that has a play on my narrative poetry, narrative style poetry at times. Sometimes a good book will get me rolling, and it's not that I'd be copying it, it just gets me in the moment. As far as poetry and models and others, I've had friends in groups that, you know, we've discussed poetry a lot before, but I'm self-taught, and I spent a lot of time just delving into it because I made a conscious decision in my life. I said, when I was about 17, I worked in so many things. I worked on, you know, but I said, I'm going to be a writer. I said, I'm going to do that. I said, there's nothing else. I'm just going to do it. I don't care what you say. And then many people would say, I remember very well, people would say, oh, are you sure you want to do that? You know, a lot of people go their whole life and die, they publish a book. And I said, yeah, I'm not worried. I'm going to do this. As far as being self-taught, it's more like it wasn't so much craft books. It was more me mimicking people I was reading. I would sit on my computer. This is, I remember about age 18, 19, and I would just type their works onto my computer so I could feel what they were writing. And when you do that, like I'm such a advocate of internalizing. When you start typing their works onto the page and you see what they wrote, but you wrote it, you feel confident. There's a sense of confidence. I remember being 18 and 19 and confident saying, oh, so this is how you do it. Also, another thing I had to learn too, and this is so important for a lot of beginning poets, is as much as we love it, sometimes we hate it. I had to learn around age 18, 19 to stay away from rhyming poetry. And it can be, if it's done well, it can be masterful. If it's not, it's completely the other way. And I thought when I was 18 that that's the way it needed to be. And then I started reading, oh, the people that are doing it these days, and they're doing it well. And I realized there's so much more room for description and imagery when you don't rely only on the rhyme. Now, that's not to say you can't hide a half rhyme in there in your poems, but to overdo it, or even a rhyme itself, but when you overdo it, I think we start getting the reader to feel things are a little outdated. So that was a big thing I had to learn when I was coming up in this field. And so many people still to this day, they swear, hey, I don't want to be writing in free verse. I don't want to, but that's only a disservice to yourself and to getting yourself out there as a poet so that you can share your wonderful message with the world, because it's just not how it is really anymore. And you're going to find the beauty. I would say if you think everything needs to rhyme, then try to write free verse. Just try. I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised with the results, and you might just change over.
Hey, Dan, how can our listeners get hold of your book?
Sure. Yeah, you can find Assisted Suicide Talk Show on Amazon.com. You can find it online, barnesandnoble.com, and select Barnes and Noble stores. We have it select independent bookstores carry it as well, walmart.com, target.com, and and let me know if you buy it. You can message me on Instagram at danfecht, DANFECHT, and I would love to sign one for you.
Fantastic. How about reading two last poems for us?
Sure thing. This poem it's a particularly loved by me because it's about the artist, us, the three of us, and everyone reading, listening to this, who reads and writes poetry. It's about my sadness towards the idea that a poet can go, or a writer can go his whole life and never be published. And they can spend all their emotions and their feelings in their life sharing it with friends and family, their passion, and never get published for one reason or another. And this poem is called Art and Its Casualties. Think of all the talent that evades this earth before ever being discovered. Lost strokes of a paintbrush, words gone unread, songs gone unsung, inventions which never left the creator's head. Culture suffers the grievance of a myriad of vanished souls that could have healed another soul with art. Have we put too much stock into the almighty dollar? Some that can't even argue desire law school. Many who don't even like people consider a doctor's scrub. Reprimanded at a young age for feeling dissimilar to the crowd, you have been. You swam like a salmon, upstream and out of dreams. If you quit, you're a statistic. Demise of the tree you planted, soil gone solid, a shrub that wants the shadows. You can only wilt because they tell you to. But those that think outside of the box don't worry about walls. This is how talent will grace this earth as medication.
That's wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think I want to hear one more, man.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Let me give you one more here. Let me see. Let me grab it. Okay, so I'm going to read this one. This is a personal favorite of my wife's, and I like it too. It's very short, but I believe it holds so much significance in a few words. Self-expose. Those who do everything for others too often may not do anything for themselves.
Oh, I love it.
Thanks.
Brother Al.
Oh, you had two poems that were very short, very concise, which for me is great because if you read my stuff, a lot of mine are very short. So,
oh, cool. I look forward to reading your stuff. I gotta check it out.
Concision's everything for me.
Oh, yeah.
So we want to thank the poet and the writer, Dan Fecht, for talking with us today, for sharing his poetry. And we encourage folks to go to his publication that he edits, DC Life, and see what else he writes. We appreciate you. Thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you so much. And feel free to check out my book also on finishinglinepress.com. I failed to mention finishinglinepress.com, as well as the other places I mentioned a moment ago in the interview. Thank you for your time, guys. And I hope any poets that are starting out watching this interview really can take into consideration these things we've talked about, because I cheer for everybody. I cheer for you. I want you to get there because I know it's possible, and it's always a work in process. It's beautiful. The more poets we have that are successful, the more chance we have to even the tables with the literary world, because poetry's not quite there anymore. It used to be, and we need to get it back there. We need the average person to be reading a poetry book or to have a poetry book on their nightstand.